I need to tell you about something that happened to me last winter, something I still can't fully wrap my head around. I'm a forest ranger, have been for almost 15 years now, and I thought I'd seen just about everything these woods had to offer. I was wrong. Dead wrong. What I discovered on a freezing December afternoon changed everything I thought I knew about the world, and honestly, I'm still not sure if I did the right thing. But I couldn't have done anything different. It was late afternoon on a Tuesday, around 3:30 or so. The sun was already getting low. You know how it is in December, feels like the day's over before it even starts. I was doing my usual patrol on the eastern section of the forest, checking the trails, making sure no one had left trash or started any illegal campfires. Just routine stuff. The temperature was dropping fast, probably around 25 degrees, and a light snow had been falling since morning. Everything was quiet, peaceful even, the kind of quiet that makes you feel alone in a good way. I was maybe 4 miles into my route when I heard it. At first I thought it was the wind. You know how wind can sound almost human sometimes when it moves through the trees. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. Crying. Someone was crying out there in the woods. My first thought was a hiker. Maybe someone got lost or hurt. We get that sometimes, people who don't realize how easy it is to lose your way when everything's covered in snow and all the landmarks disappear. I stopped walking and listened. The sound came again, and it definitely wasn't the wind. It was crying or something close to it. High-pitched, desperate sounding. My training kicked in, and I started moving toward it, calling out that I was a ranger and could help. No response, just more of that crying sound. Something about it felt off, though. I couldn't put my finger on it, but my gut was telling me this wasn't a normal situation. The sound kept moving, always ahead of me, and I found myself going deeper into the forest, way off the marked trails. The snow was deeper here, probably 6 or 7 inches, and I had to push through some thick brush. I kept following that sound, and the more I heard it, the weirder it seemed. Too human to be an animal, but not quite right for a person either. That probably doesn't make sense, but that's the best way I can describe it. After maybe 15 minutes of following the sound, I finally caught sight of something through the trees, a small dark shape, maybe 50 feet ahead. I stopped and squinted, trying to make out what it was. The shape moved, and I heard that crying sound again. I took a few steps closer, moving slowly, and that's when I got my first clear look. It was small, maybe 3 or 4 feet tall, covered in dark brown fur. Standing upright, 2 legs, 2 arms. My brain just sort of froze. I stood there staring, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It wasn't a bear cub. I know what those look like. It wasn't a person in a costume, not out here, not in this weather. It was something I'd heard stories about my whole life, but never believed was real. The creature saw me and let out a louder cry. Then it took off running, but not far, maybe 20 or 30 feet. Then it stopped and turned back to look at me, crying again. I started moving toward it, real slow, speaking softly like you would to a scared animal. The thing watched me come closer, then ran again. Same distance, stopped, looked back, cried. This pattern repeated itself maybe 10 or 12 times. The creature would run ahead, stop, look back at me, and cry. It was like it wanted me to follow, but was too scared to let me get close. My mind was racing. Part of me was thinking about all the Bigfoot stories I'd heard growing up, all the supposed sightings that never amounted to anything. But here I was, looking at something that shouldn't exist, and it was definitely real. I started wondering if this was some kind of trap. You hear stories sometimes about how animals will lure people into dangerous situations. What if there were adult Bigfoots waiting ahead, ready to attack? I had my rifle with me, standard equipment for rangers in this area because of the bears, and I made sure I could get to it quickly if I needed to. but something kept me following. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was the fact that this creature seemed genuinely distressed, or maybe I just couldn't pass up the chance to see something nobody else had seen. We went on like this for probably 20 minutes, moving deeper into the forest. The snow was falling heavier now and the light was fading. I was starting to worry about finding my way back before dark when the creature suddenly stopped completely. It didn't run this time, just stood there in a small clearing, looking down at something on the ground. I approached slowly, my hand near my rifle, not sure what I was about to see. As I got closer, maybe 30 feet away, I could make out a large, dark shape on the ground, much larger than the small creature. My heart started pounding and I stopped, trying to decide if I should get closer or get the hell out of there. The small creature looked at me and cried again, not running away this time, just standing there next to the shape on the ground. It looked between me and whatever was lying there, over and over, and the crying got more desperate. That's when I realized this little thing was asking for help. I took a deep breath and moved closer, rifle ready, watching for any movement. When I got about 10 feet away, I could finally see clearly what I was looking at. It was another Bigfoot, a huge one lying on its side in the snow, easily 8 or 9 feet tall, maybe more. It was breathing. I could see its chest moving, but the breaths were slow and labored. The small one touched its arm and made soft, whimpering sounds. I stood there for a good 5 minutes just watching, trying to figure out what to do. The big one didn't move much, didn't seem aggressive at all. Its eyes were closed. The snow continued to fall softly around us, accumulating on the creature's dark fur. I could see my breath in the cold air, but I barely felt the temperature. My whole focus was on trying to understand what I was seeing. After a while, I convinced myself it was safe enough to get closer. I moved slowly, one step at a time, until I was about 5 feet away. The infant watched me approach, but didn't run. It just stayed there next to the elder, occasionally touching its shoulder or arm, making those heartbreaking sounds. That's when the big one's eyes opened. I froze, my hand on my rifle, but it just looked at me. No anger in those eyes, no threat, just exhaustion. The eyes were dark brown, almost black, and there was something in them that seemed almost human. Or maybe more than human. I can't really explain it. I knelt down in the snow, still keeping my distance, and got a better look at the creature. Its hair was incredibly long, dark gray mixed with almost black, and matted in places. The face was deeply wrinkled, more wrinkled than any old person I'd ever seen. The hands, and I could see them clearly, were massive, but the skin on them looked thin, almost translucent. This thing was old, really, really old. The breathing was shallow and irregular. I'd seen enough dying animals in my time as a ranger to recognize what I was looking at. This Bigfoot was dying, and from the looks of it, just from old age. There were no injuries I could see, no blood, nothing that suggested an attack or accident. It was just its time. What confused me was the small one, the infant. How could such an old creature have such a young offspring? Humans can't have children at that kind of advanced age. I tried not to think about it too much. There was a lot about what I was seeing that didn't make sense by normal rules. I took off my pack and pulled out my water bottle. I opened it and held it out toward the dying Bigfoot, moving slowly so I wouldn't startle it. The creature looked at the bottle but didn't take it. I moved it closer and it weakly pushed my hand away. I tried offering an energy bar from my pack. Same response. It didn't want food or water. Instead, the big one slowly lifted its arm and pointed at the small creature. It made a low grunting sound deep in its chest. Then it gently pushed the infant toward me. The message was pretty clear even without words. It was asking me to take care of the little one. My throat got tight and my eyes started watering. Here was this creature, this thing that wasn't supposed to exist, dying alone in the snow, and its last act was trying to make sure its young one would be okay. I nodded, not sure if it could understand the gesture, and said softly that I would take care of it. The big one seemed to relax a little after that. Its eyes closed again, and it went back to that slow, labored breathing. I sat down in the snow next to them. The infant came and huddled between me and the dying adult, and I just sat there as the sun started to set. The temperature was dropping fast and the snow kept falling. The forest got quieter and quieter around us. Every now and then the infant would whimper and touch the big one's arm. Time seemed to move differently. I'm not sure how long we sat there. 30 minutes, maybe longer, maybe close to an hour. The big one's breathing got slower. I noticed each breath taking longer to come. The infant seemed to notice too. It started whimpering more, pushing against the adult like it was trying to wake it up. But the breathing just kept getting slower and more shallow. I sat there watching, feeling like I was intruding on something private and sacred. After about an hour total, I realized the breathing had stopped. I waited a minute to be sure, then slowly moved closer and checked. The big one was gone. The infant realized it immediately and let out this cry that I'll never forget. It was heartbreaking. The little thing tried to shake the adult awake, making desperate sounds, but nothing happened. It pushed and pushed, but the elder Bigfoot just lay there still and peaceful. I sat there with the infant for another 20 minutes or so, just letting it grieve. I didn't try to comfort it or interfere. It needed time. The whole situation was surreal. Here I was, sitting in the snow in a darkening forest with two Bigfoots, one dead and one alive, and my whole understanding of reality had just been turned upside down. Eventually, I knew I had to make a decision. It was getting dark fast and the temperature was still dropping. I couldn't leave the infant out here alone, it would die. But I also knew I couldn't take it back to town. If anyone found out about this, the creature would end up in some facility, studied and poked and prodded for the rest of its life. After watching that elder Bigfoot's final moments, after seeing how it trusted me with its young, I couldn't let that happen. I remembered an old logging cabin about 2 miles west. It had been abandoned for years, way back in the forest where hardly anyone ever went. I'd checked on it a few times over the years, made sure it wasn't being used for anything illegal. The structure was still solid, roof intact. It would be shelter. I stood up and gently tried to get the infant to follow me. It didn't want to leave at first, kept going back to the body, making those sad, whimpering sounds. I understood. I'd lost people too and knew what it felt like to not want to let go. But it was getting colder and darker by the minute. Eventually, after maybe 10 minutes of coaxing, the infant started following me. It kept looking back though, every few steps, like it was hoping the elder would get up and come too. The walk to the cabin took almost an hour. The snow was deep and I had to break trail, which slowed us down. I used my flashlight to navigate, trying to remember the route. The infant stayed close behind me, still making soft whimpering sounds. I kept talking to it softly, just so it would hear my voice, even though I had no idea if it understood anything I was saying. When we finally reached the cabin, I was relieved to see it was still in decent shape. The door was hanging off one hinge, but it was there. I pushed it open and shined my light inside. Dusty, cobwebs everywhere, but dry. There was an old cot against one wall, a wooden table, a chair, a few windows, some broken. But it was shelter, and right then, that's all that mattered. I got the infant inside, and it immediately went to a corner and huddled there, still making those sad sounds. I found some old rags in a cupboard and used them to wipe snow off both of us. The cabin was cold, but at least we were out of the wind. I knew I needed to get back to my truck eventually, but I couldn't leave the infant alone. Not tonight, not after everything it had just been through. I sat down on the floor and leaned against the wall. The infant watched me from its corner, eyes reflecting my flashlight. I kept talking softly, telling it everything would be okay, that I would take care of it. I'm not sure when I dozed off, but at some point exhaustion took over. When I woke up, early morning light was coming through the broken windows. The infant was asleep in the corner, curled up in a ball. It looked so small and vulnerable like that. I knew I had to get back to my truck and check in before anyone started looking for me. But I also knew I couldn't just leave the infant here alone. I needed supplies, needed to make this place livable. I gently woke the creature up and tried to explain I was leaving but would come back. I'm not sure how much it understood. When I started toward the door, it panicked, made these desperate sounds, and tried to follow me. I had to spend another 10 minutes calming it down, making it understand I was coming back. The walk back to my truck took about an hour. My mind was racing the whole time. What had I gotten myself into? How was I going to take care of a Bigfoot infant? How long would I need to do this? And what would happen if someone found out? I drove into town and went to the general store, bought blankets, food, water containers, some basic first aid supplies. Also got tools, hammer, nails, plastic sheeting to cover the broken windows. The cashier asked if I was doing some winter camping, and I just said I was fixing up an old cabin for emergency shelter use, which wasn't really a lie. I got back to the cabin around noon. As soon as I pushed the door open, the infant rushed toward me. It actually seemed happy to see me, made these excited grunting sounds. That's when it really hit me. This creature had already bonded with me. In its mind, I was all it had left. Over the next few days, I worked on making the cabin more livable, fixed the door so it closed properly, covered the broken windows with plastic sheeting, which helped keep the cold out, swept out years of dust and debris. The infant watched everything I did, following me around the cabin. It was curious about all the tools, all the supplies I'd brought. I tested different foods to see what it would eat. It wouldn't touch any meat, which surprised me, but it ate berries eagerly and nuts and vegetables. I started bringing fresh produce from town. Apples were a favorite. The way it would hold an apple in both hands and bite into it, making happy sounds, reminded me so much of a kid. I also brought water every day from a nearby stream, filling up the containers I'd bought. The hardest part was leaving each day. I had to go back to work, had to maintain my normal routine so no one would get suspicious. But every time I left, the infant would get distressed. It took time for it to understand I was always coming back. I started coming early in the morning before my shift, spending my lunch break at the cabin, then returning after work and staying until dark. On my days off, I spent most of the day there. I told my supervisor I'd gotten really into hiking and was trying to get in better shape. He seemed to buy it. No one questioned why I was spending so much time in the forest. It was my job, after all. The infant was smart, incredibly smart. Within the first week, it figured out how to open containers, even ones with tricky lids. It watched me use tools and then tried to imitate what I'd done. When I swept the floor, it wanted to try. I'd hand it the broom and it would push it around, not very effectively at first, but learning. When I organized supplies on shelves, it helped handing me things or pointing to where they should go. It was like caring for a very intelligent child. But I also tried to encourage its natural behaviors. During safe times, early morning or dusk, when hikers were unlikely to be around, I would take it outside. We'd walk through the forest and I'd show it things, how to identify edible plants, where to find water, that sort of thing. Though honestly, it seemed to already know most of this stuff instinctively. Its senses were way better than mine. It could smell things I couldn't, hear things I couldn't. Sometimes it would stop and point in a direction, and I'd listen hard but hear nothing. Then maybe 30 seconds later, I'd hear a bird or a deer moving through the brush. The infant had heard it long before I did. Sometimes it would point out animal tracks I'd completely missed. Deer tracks, rabbit tracks, even what looked like mountain lion tracks once, though I hoped that cat was long gone. The infant would crouch down and study the tracks, touch them gently with its fingers like it was reading some kind of story in them. After about 2 weeks, I noticed the infant was growing, not dramatically, but noticeably. It was getting taller, its fur was getting thicker, and it was strong, way stronger than any human child would be. One day, I was trying to move a log that had fallen near the cabin entrance. I could barely budge it. The infant came over, grabbed one end, and lifted it easily, just picked it up and moved it aside like it weighed nothing. I stood there amazed. The growth continued steadily over the weeks. I started keeping track, using marks on the cabin door frame to measure its height. Every 2 weeks, it was noticeably taller. Its shoulders were broadening too, and its hands and feet were getting bigger. It was amazing to watch this transformation happen right in front of me. Its fur changed as it grew. What had been baby soft down became thicker, coarser guard hairs mixed with the soft underlayer. The color deepened too. Where it had been a lighter brown, it darkened to a rich chocolate brown, with those lighter patches around its face and chest staying the same. The fur was beautiful, honestly, dense and healthy looking. When we went outside, it would climb trees effortlessly, scrambling up trunks and swinging from branches. Its balance and coordination were amazing. Sometimes it would get 30 or 40 feet up, and I'd get nervous, worried it would fall. But it never did. It moved through the branches like it had been born in them. It would jump from branch to branch, distances that made my heart stop. But it always landed perfectly. Sometimes it would hang by one arm, swinging, and I'd watch in awe at the strength required for that. One day it climbed so high I could barely see it through the branches. I called up to it, worried, and it responded with a cheerful grunt. Then it started climbing back down, but instead of using the trunk, it just swung from branch to branch, dropping 10 or 15 feet at a time, catching itself effortlessly. When it reached the ground, it looked at me like it was showing off, which I guess it was. The infant's senses continued to sharpen as it grew. Its hearing was extraordinary. It could hear things I couldn't even after I knew what to listen for. One time we were sitting in the cabin and it suddenly sat up alert, head turned toward the door. I listened but heard nothing. The infant went to the window and looked out. Still I heard nothing. Then, maybe 2 full minutes later, I heard voices, hikers, probably half a mile away. The infant had heard them long before me and was already prepared to hide if they came closer. Its sense of smell was incredible too. It could smell water from hundreds of yards away. It could smell which trees had edible bark. It could smell when a predator had passed through an area even hours after the animal was gone. One time, it suddenly pulled me in a different direction during our walk, making urgent sounds. I followed, and we took a wide detour. Later, we circled back, and I saw mountain lion tracks crossing exactly where we would have walked. The infant had smelled that cat and steered us away from it. Around the 3-week mark, something shifted in our relationship. The infant started showing affection. When I arrived in the morning, it would hug me. Not aggressively, just a hug, like a kid hugging a parent. The first time it happened, I wasn't sure what to do. But then I just hugged it back. Its fur was soft, and despite its strength, it was gentle. These hugs became part of our routine. Every morning, every evening, a hug, sometimes just because. Sometimes when we sat together, it would rest its head on my shoulder. Just sit there quietly, comfortable and trusting. The weight of its head, the warmth of it, the slow, steady breathing. Those moments felt sacred somehow. This creature that had lost everything, finding comfort with me. Sometimes when we walked outside, it would hold my hand, its large hand completely engulfing mine. Its hands were so much bigger than mine already, even though it was still just an infant. The fingers were longer, thicker, with tough, calloused palms. I found myself getting deeply attached. I'd never had kids of my own, never really thought I wanted them. But this felt like what I imagined that would be like, except it wasn't a human child. It was something else entirely, something that wasn't supposed to exist but clearly did. Some mornings I'd wake up excited to go see it. Some evenings I'd stay at the cabin longer than I should, not wanting to leave. The bond between us grew stronger every day. The infant started showing personality too. It had preferences, likes, and dislikes. It loved apples but wasn't crazy about oranges. It liked to play with pine cones but wasn't interested in sticks. It loved snow and would roll in it, throw it in the air, bury itself in it. But it didn't like rain much, would huddle under cover when it rained and look grumpy about it. It had a sense of humor too. One day I was bent over stacking firewood and it snuck up behind me and poked me in the ribs. I jumped and spun around and it made that huffing laugh sound. Another time it hid my hat and watched me look for it, clearly amused. When I finally spotted it hanging in a tree, the infant was practically shaking with laughter. It could be mischievous too. Sometimes it would rearrange things in the cabin while I was gone, putting my supplies in different places, not maliciously, just playing. Or it would steal my gloves and make me chase it to get them back. These little games became part of our relationship. They showed me it wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. It was happy. But it also had moods, days when it was more subdued, quieter, days when it would sit and stare out the window for long periods. I learned to recognize these moods and respond appropriately. Sometimes it wanted company and comfort. Sometimes it wanted space. Just like people, really. I kept thinking about the future. How long would the infant need me? When would it be ready to live completely wild? Or would it always need some human contact now that it had bonded with me? I didn't have answers to any of these questions. I just took things day by day. One afternoon in early January, I had a close call. I was at the cabin with the infant when I heard voices outside, hikers passing nearby. The infant and I both froze. It started to whimper, and I gently put my hand over its mouth, trying to keep it quiet. We stayed absolutely still for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few minutes. The voices faded and moved on, but my heart was pounding. If anyone discovered us, everything would fall apart. After that, I was more careful. I taught the infant that when it heard voices, it needed to stay silent and hidden. I used hand signals, repeated the lesson over and over. I would say a word like hide, and then demonstrate what I meant, going into the corner and staying quiet. Then I'd make the infant do it. I brought magazines from town and showed it pictures of people, trying to convey that other humans were dangerous. I'd point to the pictures, shake my head, put my finger to my lips. I'm not sure how much it truly understood, but it seemed to get the basic idea. Whenever it heard strange sounds after that, it would immediately go quiet and still, sometimes retreating to the cabin's back corner. The weather got colder as January wore on. I brought more blankets to the cabin, got a small wood stove working that had been there all along but needed cleaning out. Showed the infant how to maintain a fire safely. It was fascinated by fire but also very careful around it, which was good. I'd show it how to add logs, not too many at once, and it would watch intently. Then it would try, picking up a small log and placing it carefully on the flames. I gathered firewood and taught the infant how to stack it properly. Bigger pieces on the bottom, smaller on top, keeping it dry and accessible. The infant was a quick learner. After seeing me do it once or twice, it started doing it on its own. Sometimes I'd arrive at the cabin to find it had already stacked more wood, ready for the night. I was preparing it to eventually manage on its own. Though the thought of that day made me sad, By the 2-month mark, the transformation was remarkable. The infant that had been terrified and grieving was now more confident and capable. It was probably over 4 feet tall at this point, still growing. Its fur was thick and glossy, dark brown with some lighter patches around the face and chest. It still had playful moments, lots of them. Play seemed to be an important part of his development, and I encouraged it. It would chase me around outside, and I'd run, pretending it couldn't catch me, even though it easily could. I'd zigzag through trees, duck behind rocks, try to lose it. But it would track me effortlessly, sometimes wading ahead on the path it knew I'd take. When it caught me, which it always did, it would tackle me gently into the snow, and we'd both end up laughing. We'd wrestle, and it always won, pinning me down gently, making happy grunting sounds like it was laughing. I'd pretend to struggle, and it would let me almost get free, then pin me again. It understood the game, understood to be gentle, even though it was strong enough to really hurt me if it wanted to. That level of control and awareness was impressive. It loved throwing pine cones at trees to see if it could hit them. It had amazing aim, better than mine for sure. We'd have little competitions seeing who could hit a specific tree trunk from 20 feet away. I'd hit maybe 1 out of 5. The infant would hit 3 or 4 out of 5. Sometimes it would let me win, I swear. It would aim and then deliberately miss, making it look accidental, but I could tell. The snowball fights we had were epic. I'd start them usually scooping up snow and lobbing it at the infant. Its reflexes were so fast it could catch the snowballs mid-air sometimes, or duck them at the last second. When it threw snowballs back, it was careful not to throw too hard, adjusting its strength for me. But it was still way better than me at the game. It could pack a snowball one-handed while running. It could throw with either hand with equal accuracy. One day I heard it laugh for the first time. Really laugh. We were outside and it had thrown a snowball that hit me right in the face. It was a strange sound, not quite human, but definitely laughter. A kind of huffing, wheezing sound that was somehow joyful. Like a mix between a bark and a cough, but clearly expressing happiness. I laughed too, wiping snow off my face, and threw a snowball back. We ended up having a full snowball fight, both of us laughing and playing like kids. For those moments, I forgot entirely that this wasn't a human child. It was just my kid, my responsibility, and we were having fun together. The infant loved to slide down snowy slopes too. We'd find a good hill and it would sit down and push off, sliding down on its rear end, arms out for balance. Then it would climb back up and do it again. And again, I'd slide down too and we'd race, though it always won because it could control its slide better. Sometimes we'd slide down together, the infant in front and me behind, both of us whooping and hollering. Those moments of joy were mixed with the constant awareness of how much responsibility I had. This creature depended on me completely. What would happen if I got sick, if I got hurt, if something happened to me? These thoughts kept me up at night sometimes. I had no backup plan, no one I could call if something went wrong. This secret was mine alone, and if something happened to me, the infant would be on its own again. I started leaving extra supplies at the cabin just in case. More food than usual, extra firewood, containers filled with water, instructions written down, even though the infant couldn't read them. Just something that made me feel a little less anxious about the what-ifs. But I also saw it becoming more independent. Sometimes when I arrived at the cabin, it wouldn't be at the window waiting like it usually was. It would come back after a few minutes from exploring nearby. It was getting comfortable with the area, learning the territory. I watched it catch fish from the stream one day. It stood perfectly still at the edge, watching the water, then its hand shot out lightning fast and came up with a fish, quick and efficient. It looked at me like it was proud, holding up the fish. I clapped and told it good job. During those weeks and months, I spent more and more time just sitting with the infant. Teaching it, yes, but also just being present. I'd tell it stories about my life, about growing up, about what the world outside the forest was like. I have no idea how much it understood, but it would sit and listen, those dark eyes focused on me. Sometimes I felt like it understood more than I gave it credit for. I taught it practical things too. How to bank a fire for the night so it would last until morning. You cover it with ash, leave just a small amount of air, and it'll smolder all night. Then in the morning, you uncover it, add kindling, and it comes right back to life. The infant watched me do this several times before trying it itself. The first attempt, it buried the fire too much and it went out completely. But the second night, it got it perfect. The fire lasted all the way until dawn. I showed it how to identify which mushrooms were safe and which were poisonous. We'd walk through the forest and I'd point out different varieties. Chanterelles were good, easy to identify with their golden color and the way they smelled faintly like apricots. Morels were safe too, with their distinctive honeycomb caps. But I made sure it knew about the death caps and destroying angels, the ones that could kill you. I'd point to them, shake my head vigorously, make an X with my arms. The infant seemed to understand. It would nod and keep its distance from those ones. We'd follow animal trails together, learning to read the forest. The infant was better at this than me, honestly. It could look at a trail and know immediately what had passed through. Deer trails were obvious, narrow, and winding. Bear trails were wider, more direct. The infant showed me things I'd never noticed, how certain plants grew along water sources, how you could tell the direction of water flow by looking at moss on rocks, how different trees indicated different soil conditions. I taught it to listen to the forest, the sounds that meant danger and the sounds that meant everything was okay. When birds suddenly went quiet, that meant a predator was near. When squirrels made their chattering alarm calls, something was moving through the territory. When ravens circled and cawed, there was often carrion nearby. The infant absorbed all of this, its head tilting as it listened, learning to interpret every sound. One afternoon, I was showing it how to find water when you're lost. You look for green vegetation in a line. That usually means a stream or creek. You listen for the sound of running water, though that can be tricky in winter when everything might be frozen. You watch for game trails that converge, because animals need water too, and their paths often lead to it. The infant picked up on all these cues incredibly fast. The infant was a quick learner. It picked things up after seeing them just once or twice. One day I showed it how to make a simple snare from some cord I'd brought. Just a demonstration. I tied a slip knot, showed it how to position it on a game trail, how to anchor it to a sapling that would pull tight when an animal stepped through. The next day it had made 3 snares on its own and actually caught a rabbit. It didn't eat it. Remember, it wouldn't touch meat. But it showed me like it was proud of learning the skill. I praised it, made a big deal of it, and I swear the creature beamed with pride. I also taught it about weather patterns, how to read the clouds and know when snow was coming. Those high, wispy cirrus clouds usually meant weather would change within 24 hours. Low, dark clouds meant immediate precipitation. The way the wind shifted before a storm. The infant started predicting weather before I did, pointing to the sky and making concerned sounds hours before a storm would hit. We practiced building emergency shelters together. I'd show it how to lean branches against a fallen log, how to layer pine boughs for insulation, how to dig down into snow to create a windbreak. The infant had good instincts for this, probably better than any human. It knew how to pick the right location, out of the wind, near resources, but not in a drainage where cold air would pool. I brought it my old compass and tried to explain how to use it. I'm not sure how much it grasped about magnetic north and directions, but it understood that the needle always pointed the same way. And really, the infant didn't need a compass. It had an internal sense of direction that was better than any tool. It always knew which way was back to the cabin, no matter how far we wandered. There were hard days too, days when the infant seemed sad, when it would sit in the corner and make those soft whimpering sounds. I figured it was thinking about the elder Bigfoot. On those days, I would just sit with it, my hand on its shoulder, letting it know it wasn't alone. Sometimes that's all you can do for someone who's grieving. Just be there. Sometimes the infant would touch my face gently, like it was studying me. Its hands were large but so gentle. It would trace my features, touch my hair, look into my eyes. I wonder what it thought of me. This strange, hairless creature who'd taken it in. I wonder if it missed its own kind, if it ever thought about the elder Bigfoot and wished things had been different. Around week 10, I noticed it sometimes didn't come to the window at all when I arrived. I'd have to wait 5 or 10 minutes before it showed up from somewhere in the woods. Part of me was proud. It was growing up, getting more capable. Part of me felt a little sad. It needed me less and less. But that was the goal, wasn't it? To prepare it to survive on its own. The whole point of all this was to give it the skills and confidence to live independently, not to keep it dependent on me forever. Still, those moments of waiting were hard. I'd stand outside the cabin in the snow, looking around, listening for sounds of its approach. Sometimes I'd worry, what if it had gotten hurt? What if something had happened? But then it would emerge from the trees, sometimes carrying something it wanted to show me, and all those worries would melt away. One morning in late February, I arrived to find the infant had caught a rabbit. Not to eat, it still wouldn't touch meat, but it had caught it and let it go, just practicing its hunting skills. I was impressed. The creature was developing all the skills it would need to survive as an adult. It showed me where it had tracked the rabbit, how it had approached from downwind, how it had moved slow and stayed low. It was teaching itself, learning from trial and error, becoming more capable every day. I started taking it on longer walks, farther from the cabin, showing it more of the forest, more hiding places, more sources of food and water. The infant was confident now, moving through the woods like it belonged there. Which I guess it did, more than I did, really. I was always aware of being a visitor in this wilderness. The infant was becoming part of it, integrated into the ecosystem in a way I could never be. We explored caves together, places where it could shelter if needed. I showed it how to check for occupants first, how to read signs of bears or mountain lions that might be denning. The infant learned quickly, always cautious, always thinking ahead. We found several good shelters, natural places it could use if the cabin ever became unavailable or if it decided to move on. We'd go out for 2 or 3 hours sometimes, just exploring, sometimes longer. One day we were gone for almost 5 hours, wandering far to the north where I'd never been. The infant seemed to have a destination in mind, leading me to a spot where a natural spring bubbled up even in winter, creating a small pool of water that never froze. It had found this on its own, remembered it, and wanted to share it with me. I was touched by that. It could have kept its discoveries to itself, but it wanted me to know about them too. I'd point out landmarks so it could find its way back. A distinctive rock formation here, an old dead tree there, a particular bend in a creek. The infant's memory was incredible. Show it something once and it remembered. We'd return to the same spots days later, and it would lead me there, no hesitation, taking the most efficient route without any need for trail markers or signs. It was learning to read the forest in ways I never could. It would notice tiny details. A tuft of fur caught on a branch indicating what animal had passed. The way certain plants were bent showing the direction of travel. Scratch marks on trees from bears marking territory. antler rubs on saplings from deer. It absorbed all of this information, building a mental map not just of geography, but of the forest's inhabitants and their patterns. By the 3-month mark, we had a solid routine. I visited every morning and evening. The cabin was comfortable, warm, even with the wood stove. The infant was thriving physically and emotionally. It still needed me, but was clearly growing toward adolescence. I was committed to continuing this arrangement for as long as necessary. Could be months, could be years. I didn't know. I tried not to project too far into the future. Just stayed focused on today, on being present for this creature that depended on me. I thought a lot about what I'd been taught growing up, about compassion, about helping those in need, about love being shown through actions rather than just words. My mother used to say you can tell a lot about a person by how they treat those who can do nothing for them. The infant couldn't do anything for me, couldn't repay me, couldn't even tell anyone what I'd done. But that wasn't the point. The point was doing the right thing simply because it was right. This creature had been given into my care by that dying elder Bigfoot. I couldn't turn away from that responsibility. It didn't matter that it wasn't human. It deserved care and protection just the same as any orphan child would. Maybe more so because if its existence became known, the consequences would be severe. Not just for it, but for any others of its kind that might be out there. I wondered about that sometimes. Were there other Bigfoots in these mountains? Was the infant part of a larger population, or was it truly alone? I'd never seen any sign of others, never found tracks or heard calls, but the forest was vast. There could be dozens of them scattered through these mountains, and I'd never know. Maybe someday the infant would find others. That thought made me both happy and sad. Happy because it wouldn't be alone, sad because it would mean it wouldn't need me anymore. Sometimes at night, I'd lie in bed and think about that December afternoon, about hearing that cry in the woods and deciding to follow it instead of radioing for backup or just marking the location and investigating later. About watching the elder Bigfoot die, that slow, peaceful passing, about making the choice to take the infant to the cabin instead of calling wildlife services or whatever the proper channels would have been. Did I do the right thing? I still don't know for sure. The official thing would have been to report it, let experts handle it, let science study this incredible creature. Part of me felt guilty about keeping the secret. This was potentially one of the most important zoological discoveries in history, and I was hiding it away in an old cabin. But then I'd remember that look in the elder Bigfoot's eyes, that final gesture pushing its young toward me. That wasn't a request for me to turn the infant over to humans. That was a plea to protect it. And that's what I was doing. I couldn't imagine the infant in captivity, locked in some facility, examined and studied day after day, never allowed to climb trees freely, never allowed to run through snow, never allowed to just be what it was meant to be. That would be a living death. No, better to keep this secret, better to protect this creature, even if it meant science never got to study it. The infant's freedom was worth more than any research paper. Now here we are, still maintaining this routine. The infant, though I guess I should stop calling it that since it's growing so fast, still waits for me. Still gets excited when I arrive, though in a more subdued way now, less like a child and more like a young adult, showing affection but also showing independence. We spend time together, I make sure it has what it needs, and slowly I'm teaching it everything I can about surviving in the wild. Though honestly, it's teaching me just as much about resilience, about trust, about the mystery of what else might be out there in these forests. I've learned that intelligence comes in many forms. The infant can't read or write, can't speak human languages, can't do mathematics, but it has an intelligence that's perfectly suited to its world. It can predict weather by observing subtle cues I'd never notice. It can navigate by stars and landmarks with perfect accuracy. It can read animal behavior and know when to hide and when it's safe. That's intelligence too, just a different kind. I've learned about the capacity for cross-species bonding. Before this, I would have said deep emotional connections required shared language, shared culture, shared experience. But the bond between me and the infant proves otherwise. We don't share any of those things, but the connection is real. Built on mutual care, mutual respect, mutual presence. I don't know what the end of the story looks like. Maybe one day it will head off into the deep woods and I won't see it again. That thought breaks my heart, but I know it's probably what's best. It needs to find its own kind, if any exist. It needs to live a full life, not a half-life, hovering between the human world and its own world. Maybe it will always want some connection with me. Maybe years from now, it'll show up at the cabin with young of its own, showing them the strange human who helped it survive. I'd like that. I'm okay with either outcome, really. My job is to give it the best chance at life that I can for as long as it needs me. And then to let it go when it's ready, even if I'm not ready. That's what love is. Not holding on, but knowing when to let go. People ask me sometimes why I spend so much time hiking these days, why I'm always tired, always distracted, always slipping away to the forest. My friends wonder if I'm okay, if something's bothering me. I just smile and say I find peace in the forest. They have no idea how true that is. Every morning when I make that walk to the cabin, every evening when I check in before dark, I'm reminded of that December afternoon when I heard crying in the woods and followed it. My life changed that day in ways I never could have imagined. I used to think my job was just about managing resources and keeping people safe. Check the trails, watch for fires, make sure regulations are followed. Simple, straightforward work. But now I understand it's about something bigger. It's about protecting wild places and wild things. It's about recognizing that we don't own this land, we share it. And sometimes that means protecting things even from our own curiosity, our own desire to know and understand and categorize everything. I think about the elder Bigfoot sometimes, about its final act of trust, pushing its young toward a stranger and hoping for the best. That took incredible courage, more courage than most humans would have, trusting a different species with their most precious thing. I hope wherever it is now, in whatever comes after death, it knows I kept my promise. I'm taking care of its little one, and I'll keep doing that for as long as needed, however long that may be. Whether that's another month or another year or another decade. That's the thing about love, real love, the kind that's shown through action rather than words. It doesn't matter if it's for your own species or something completely different. When a living being needs help and you're in a position to give it, you don't turn away. You don't overthink it. You don't worry about what's normal or expected. You just do what needs to be done. I think about all the reasons I could have walked away. It would have been safer, easier, more rational. I could have convinced myself that nature takes its course, that it wasn't my problem, that I shouldn't interfere. But then I remember that moment. The elder dying in the snow, the infant crying, that gesture pushing its young toward me. Some moments change you, some choices define who you are, and in that moment there was only one choice I could make and still be able to live with myself. So I keep making those trips to the cabin, keep bringing supplies, keep teaching and learning and being present. The bond between us is real and deep, deeper than I would have thought possible between such different beings. This has become my purpose, caring for this young life that was entrusted to me for as long as it takes. And I'm at peace with that, more at peace than I've been with anything else in my life, actually. This feels right in a way nothing else ever has. And that's how I know, despite all my doubts and questions, that I made the right choice that December day. I followed the crying in the woods, and it led me exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what I needed to do, being exactly who I needed to be. Not just a forest ranger, but a guardian, a protector, a friend to something that shouldn't exist but does. And I'm grateful for that. Grateful for the chance to be part of something bigger than myself, something that matters in a way few things truly do. Sometimes I wonder what will happen in the coming years. Will the infant grow into a fully adult Bigfoot, 8 or 9 feet tall like the elder? Will it remember me when it's grown, or will these months fade into distant memory? I don't know. I try not to think too far ahead, but I can't help imagining that day years from now when I might encounter a massive Bigfoot in these woods, and it pauses, looks at me with recognition, maybe even approaches gently. Would it remember the human who took it in? Who taught it to survive? Who sat with it through those first terrible nights of grief? I hope so. But even if it doesn't, that's okay too. My reward isn't its memory of me. My reward is knowing I did the right thing, that when faced with an impossible choice, I chose compassion over protocol. I chose to protect rather than expose. I chose to serve this creature's needs rather than satisfy human curiosity, including my own. This experience has changed how I see my job, my life, everything. I walk through these forests differently now, more aware, more respectful, more humble. I understand that there are mysteries here worth protecting, things beyond our current understanding that don't need to be explained or cataloged. Sometimes the best thing we can do for the wild places is leave them wild, leave them mysterious, leave them alone. For more interesting stories, check this out.